Welcome to the Monday episode of Stand Up. I have a really awesome conversation with the brilliant and hilarious John Fugelsang. Joins me today, and I think it was really special. We covered a lot in our almost 1 hour conversation. If you want to skip my little news update, my news and notes section to get right to my conversation with John, then it begins at about 23 minutes in after a very robust and comprehensive news recap. But also, I'll be hosting a hangout this evening at 8 p.m. to get your read on everything happening in the Middle East, the Arab-Israeli conflict, your thoughts about it, who I should be booking on the show the rest of the week as well. I hope you'll meet me tonight at 8 p.m. for about an hour-long hangout. We didn't get to do it last week because I went out and saw Ava at Ithaca College, and it was awesome. Had a great, almost full day with her. I got up there in the afternoon on Thursday and left her at work 4 o'clock on Friday. I spent the weekend here alone and working all day yesterday and today trying to catch up and do research on the history of the Middle East conflict, which I've studied and covered throughout my career and life, but just wanted to get refreshed and remind myself of all of the context around what has happened there, what is continuing to happen there. On Thursday morning, I posted a conversation with Jonathan Alter, the author and journalist, and it got real mixed reviews. Taffy said, such a great interview with Jonathan Alter. A lot of details I'd forgotten over the years. He's amazing. So are you. Have fun with Ava. Thanks, Taffy. Willie Thomas emailed and said, love your show. However, the Alter interview was cringeworthy. He lost me when he tried to split hairs defining terrorism. He also made it seem like the Palestinian people were not innocent but made choices leading to their plight. Maybe some did. Some people just want to live their life peacefully. Alter sounds like if black people had made different choices, the Klan, who may not have been called terrorists but sick, would have been killed or bombed or targeted black people. He lacked the consistency I would have expected from a respectable journalist. How in the world will violence not create a continued cycle of violence? More generational Israeli enemies are being created by the destruction. There has to be a better way than this cycle. It will only spread. They need a Mandela type who would have every reason to want revenge, to say enough is enough. Willie, thanks very much for the email. I think they have had Mandela types on both sides, and they've been shot and assassinated when trying to make peace. I think that's one of the sad, very challenging issues there. And Kristen emailed, I think it's time to get a pro-Palestinian interview on the podcast regarding the Jonathan Alter interview. Alter interview was hard to listen to because he was obviously pro-Israel and there was no bounce, no pushback. I appreciate you trying to push back. You and most people aren't experts. I want to hear a pro-Palestinian expert. I think stand-up with Pete Dominic could benefit from another take on this complicated war. Make fake producer Keith get the booking done. Kristen, thank you very much. And Aaron the farmer was really pissed off about that interview. He said, I'm pissed off about this shit. I'm not a smart man, Pete, but I really, really hate being treated like I'm stupid. This whole, if you don't blindly support Israel, then you support Hamas does. From listening to Jonathan Alter interview, all I could do was hear vengeance in his voice, and from other people as well that I thought I was cool with. Just so fucking sad all the way around. Really fucking painful. Yeah, Aaron, I think you captured it well. And finally, Nick DiFabrizio texted me about that interview and said, your interview with Jonathan Alter was one of your best. You pushed back at all the right times. This is a clusterfuck that may throw the 2024 to Trump and GOP as many young voters and activists on the left stay home. For many of them, ambivalence toward Biden will turn to disdain. Well, I hope you're wrong about that, Nick. But I just got to say thank you very much for all of your feedback, including the more critical emails and feedback. I really appreciate that. I was, I guess, not surprised by what kind of response that conversation elicited. Jonathan did sound really mad and emotional, more so than normal, obviously always opinionated, but understandable as well. I think it's important to realize that we don't want to deny anybody's feelings or deny anybody's anger or say you're not allowed to feel that way. I think one thing that I certainly learned is different people have a different narrative that's been fed to them over the years on this conflict, on this issue, and even on this most recent horrible attack. I think it's worth asking people and trying to find out how closely they've paid attention to the history of the conflict, much less to the year of it. I've been covering it my whole career, paying pretty close attention to it, reading Middle Eastern news outlets, books, articles, and of course conducting interviews with experts across the spectrum on this, for sure. But I got to say, I was in the car for, I don't know, maybe like 15 hours total from my home to Pittsburgh, from Pittsburgh to Ithaca, and Ithaca back to my house in over 3 days at the end of last week. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of news broadcasts which told the story of the victims and the survivors. Listen to all of the Sunday shows and a couple of hours of other shows, more than a couple of hours of other shows that aired on Thursday and Friday evening on CNN and MSNBC, and to hear the voices, the anguish, the suffering of the victims of these horrible terrorist attacks, the pain in their voices, and the way they talked about what the future, how the future would be different, and just the dehumanizing of the Palestinians that I heard from the victims. I mean, they were on networks calling Palestinians the terrorists animals, and many of you, I'm sure, agree with that kind of rhetoric, and you can't blame them for saying those things. But if you could separate yourself from it for just a second, you realize that that's the kind of rhetoric that teaches and allows men to kill each other in cold blood that way when you dehumanize each other. So I always find that really scary to hear that kind of language, but also really don't blame the victims here. And now to see the victims in Gaza of the bombings there, whole city blocks just being demolished. It's all so terrible. And so you are forgiven for feeling the pain of these people. You are forgiven if you have decided to look away from this. I understand that. I think it's important to take breaks from the news entirely, much less a story like that. I was excited to see our friend Kim Nyborg is on her way to Disney with their kids while they still enjoy it, and that made me happy. Kim, I hope you're not necessarily listening to today's show on your vacation, but if you are, hi, I hope you have a great time. I really want to hear from you, so I hope that you will join me tonight at 8 p.m. You can write things in the chat. You can say things, obviously, in the Hangout. We'll hear from more points of view on this issue and how you think I should cover it here on the podcast, who I should be talking to, how I should be talking about it, and how we don't let it necessarily distract us from several other important issues that we need to continue to discuss each and every day on this daily podcast. So hope to see you tonight at 8. That should be great to get your comments, your criticisms, and whatever else you want to say about this and the show moving forward this week and just indefinitely. If you're a stand-up subscriber, there should be a link to the Hangout in today's daily email. Still having problems with this Patreon app. I'll figure it out hopefully this week, but the link should be in the subscriber email. And if you're not a subscriber, sign up now at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Okay, well, let's have some laughs, shall we? Saturday Night Live is back on NBC Saturday night, and I love this couple of few jokes from Weekend Update with Michael Che and Colin Jost.
Well, this was a terrible week for the world, but a great week for random idiots who like to share completely unhinged thoughts wherever they can. And weirdly, it's not even on social media anymore. I saw a 1,000-word essay called How I'd Fix Palestine, and it was posted in a Yelp review of a Buffalo Wild Wings. Even world leaders who could be making it better are making it worse. For example, former President Trump went out of his way to praise the terrorist group Hezbollah, calling them, quote, very smart. Though in Trump's defense, he thinks Hezbollah is the genie from Aladdin.
LaFonza Butler was sworn in as California's newest senator, becoming the first openly black woman in Congress. You mean second, said George Santos. New York Congressman George Santos, seen here in a promo for a pawn shop reality show, was indicted on federal charges including conspiracy, wire fraud, and identity theft. He was also indicted for reckless homicide when that button shot off his jacket and killed a bystander.
New Jersey Senator and most successful member of the Lollipop Guild, Bob Menendez, was indicted on new charges accusing him of accepting bribes from Egypt. Menendez denied the allegations, calling them as over the top as my new bejeweled scarab.
All right, you had to see that one.
Republicans on Friday nominated Jim Jordan to be the next House Speaker. Jordan is best known for denying the 2020 election results, looking the other way on an Ohio State sexual abuse scandal, and for his role as Anger in Inside Out.
All right, there you go. There's some jokes. And the host was former Saturday Night Live alumni Pete Davidson, who delivered a great about 2-minute opening monologue with just a couple laughs, but mostly serious. I thought it was really poignant. I give Pete a lot of credit for this. Here it is, in case you missed it.
This week, we saw the horrible images and stories from Israel and Gaza. And I know what you're thinking. Who better to comment on it than Pete Davidson? Well, in a lot of ways, I am a good person to talk about it because when I was 7 years old, my dad was killed in a terrorist attack. So I know something about what that's like. I saw so many terrible pictures this week of children suffering, Israeli children and Palestinian children. And it took me back to a really horrible, horrible place. And, you know, no one in this world deserves to suffer like that, you know, especially not kids, you know. After my dad died, my mom tried pretty much everything she could do to cheer me up. I remember one day when I was 8, she got me what she thought was a Disney movie, but it was actually the Eddie Murphy stand-up special, Delirious. And we played it in the car on the way home, and when she heard the things Eddie Murphy was saying, she tried to take it away. But then she noticed something. For the first time in a long time, I was laughing again. I don't understand it. I really don't, and I never will. But sometimes comedy is really the only way forward through tragedy. You know, my heart is with everyone whose lives have been destroyed this week. But tonight, I'm going to do what I've always done in the face of tragedy, and that's try to be funny. Remember, I said try. And live from New York, it's Saturday night.
All right, Pete Davidson. I thought that was great. Also, here's 2 minutes from President Biden over the weekend. He was at the Human Rights Campaign. A lot of people talking about this moment in his speech.
What happened in Charlottesville. Just a little bit, and it comes roaring out again. Folks, we have to reject hate in every form, because history has taught us again and again. Anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, they're all connected. Hate toward one group left unanswered opens the door for more hate toward more groups more often, readily. But here's what history shows. The antidote to hate is love. The answer to twisted, dehumanizing ideology is solidarity and standing there for everyone in humanity. That's why the laws that actually protect equality matter every single American, no matter who you are, who you love, or where you come from. This shouldn't be about conservative, liberal, red, or blue. It should be about realizing the promise of the Declaration of Independence. Sounds corny, but a promise rooted in the sacred and the secular, that all people are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Folks, it may sound corny, but we've never fully lived up to that promise, but we've never walked away from it like many want us to do. And we're not going to walk away from it on my watch, I promise you. And all of you here tonight, and all the advocates and allies across the country, I see the light that's going to triumph over the darkness. I see the hope that's going to conquer fear. I see the love that's going to overcome hate in all its forms. I see a great nation because we're basically a good people. We just remember who we are, and we're not the victim, and although we're good folks, we got to stand up and holler. We got to stand up and holler. You cannot be silent. Silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. Folks, we're the United States of America. And there's nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. Nothing, nothing, nothing. So let's stand together and get everyone else on the deal. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
All right, there he goes, your president, very fired up over the weekend. So I wanted to share that for you as well. Now, here is the former president short-circuiting in a new video as concerns have grown over his cognitive decline. A very confused Donald Trump said that Republicans eat their young in one of his strangest videos yet, and his handlers refused to correct him. And I'm going to play it for you because it's pretty nuts. So here it is, the former disgraced President Donald Trump.
But remember, Republicans eat their young. They really do. They eat their young. Terrible statement, but it's true.
So there he is, short-circuiting yesterday, and I wanted to share that one with you. Well, his polar opposite, President Biden, reached out to some of the families of those who lost people or had missing family members, including Jonathan Deckel-Chen, who was on CNN with Abby Phillips talking about his phone call with President Biden. And I thought this, too, was worth sharing with you.
I certainly understand what you're saying there. You had this call, though, with President Biden today, one of several families who were represented there. What did the president say, and were you satisfied with what he had to offer to you and the other families?
Yeah. Well, I would say, I won't lie. It was not an easy conversation. Many representatives of families are, as we can all understand, really upset and looking for answers that really no one can give right now. What I can say about President Biden, who spent about 45 minutes with us, there were about 20 representatives, about 20 families there, as an American citizen, as an Israeli citizen, as someone whose beloved son, we are sure, is being held. Alive, dead, wounded, we don't know. I could not possibly ask for more than President Biden expressed about the United States' commitment to getting these people back, not just the American hostages, but all of the Israeli hostages, and that he and the administration are in this for the long haul. As crazy as this must sound, at that moment, as proud as I am to be an Israeli, I was no less proud to be an American as a result of that phone call. And honestly, most of the time he was listening to people's stories and their desires for his action. And his answers were inspiring. Not that he could give information. I don't think there's much information to give right now. But his willingness to listen, I found it extraordinary. And to empathize with the people who are in enormous pain.
Yeah.
All right. I thought that was really interesting and important to share with you. And one more clip that I want to play, and then we'll get to my conversation with John Fugelsang, which is fantastic, if I do say so myself. Like I said, I watched or listened to all of the Sunday shows and more over the weekend. I had a lot of media time, alone time, and I really enjoyed it. But I think this is probably the journalistic moment that I appreciated the most, because Jake Sullivan was on, I think, 4 of the corporate media shows: Face the Nation, Meet the Press, ABC News This Week, and CNN State of the Union. I think they have that right, 3 or 4, but nobody did a better job than Jake Tapper. I think he has played this as objectively as you possibly can, and he is a very proud Jewish American, but he's doing his best to be as fair to the Palestinian people, I think, as anybody in media, in the mainstream corporate media, I should say. And he grilled Jake Sullivan about the treatment of the people in the Gaza Strip. I think this 2 minutes is worth sharing.
Say you stand for the rule of law. Again, Hamas is vile. What they did 8 days ago, they're targeting civilians. It's horrific. But what's going on right now is not just a punishment of Hamas. More than 700 children have been reportedly killed in Gaza. And obviously, electricity, food, water supplies have been cut off by Israel to the totality of Gaza. Obviously, the blockade is not just by Israel, it's by Egypt, too. Take a listen to what Secretary Blinken said last year when Putin was targeting Ukrainian infrastructure.
Heat, water, electricity for children, for the elderly, for the sick. These are President Putin's new targets. He's hitting them hard. This brutalization of Ukraine's people is barbaric.
Now look, Israel is not Russia. Gaza is not Ukraine. It's a different situation. But cutting off supplies, cutting off heat, cutting off water to civilians, what's the difference?
Well, first, thank you for saying that Israel is not Russia, because Israel is not Russia.
But
second,
civilians are civilians,
before,
Jake.
We are in
Civilians are civilians.
contact. Yes, absolutely they are, and they deserve, as I said before, access to water and medicine and food. And we are working actively to ensure that that happens. And I can tell you this morning, Jake, that I have been in touch with my Israeli counterparts just within the last hour who report to me that they have, in fact, turned the water pipe back on in southern Gaza. That has been the subject of discussion over the course of the past few days. The United States is going to continue working with Israel, with the UN, with Egypt, with Jordan, and with a lot of the groups on the ground to make sure that innocent Palestinians get access to those basic necessities and are protected from bombardment, because they deserve that right, the right to those necessities and the right to safety and security every bit as much as Ukrainian civilians do or civilians anywhere do. And the United States hasn't made any bones about that. We're working hard on that. We're working to make sure that that is the case as this unfolds. And it's something that has been a high priority for President Biden, for Secretary Blinken, and for Mike.
All right, it got cut off there, but I thought that was really good job by Jay Tapper. Well, there's so much more, obviously, to say, but I'm 20 minutes into this. I just wanted to mention a couple of other news stories, and I hope that you'll join me tonight at 8 p.m. to talk about all of the other angles here. But in other related stories, the FBI has seen an increase in reported threats in a wake of attacks in Israel. A 6-year-old boy was fatally stabbed in an anti-Muslim attack, according to police in Illinois. Officials said they considered the attack outside of Chicago a hate crime tied to the fighting in Israel and Gaza. Horrific news coming out of Illinois there. And Netanyahu says the Gaza bombing is just the beginning before an expected ground invasion, where apparently 600,000 Palestinians have tried to get out of northern Gaza. And in other news, New Zealand elected its most right-wing government in a generation, handing victory to a coalition of 2 conservative parties. Not good. Also, a hardline conservative won the Louisiana governor's race, Jeff Landry, giving Republican full control of that state. Looks like Jim Jordan is the Republicans' pick to be Speaker of the House, but does he have the votes? It doesn't look like it. It looks like that vote is going to be Tuesday, according to some reports. Federal prosecutors will argue today that a judge should impose a limited gag order on President Trump related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And the U.S. is hosting a joint summit on Friday with the European Union. Leaders are expected to discuss support for Ukraine in the Israeli-Gaza war. And I saw that actress Suzanne Summers passed away at the age of 76 after like a 25-year fight with cancer. I didn't agree with her politics, but I sure loved her on Three's Company. That was sad to see. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all the news that I have for you, other than the fact that the Jets beat the Philadelphia Eagles, who were undefeated up until that point, so maybe I have to start rooting for them again? Come on, I really don't care, but that was exciting. All right, let's get to my guest today. I had a great conversation with my friend John Fugelsang, who you can hear every single day on SiriusXM, the SiriusXM Liberal Channel, Progress from 9 p.m. to midnight Eastern. And you can see him this weekend, October 21st, in L.A., Stephanie Miller's Sexy Liberal Comedy Show. Wait till you hear who is on that. Tickets available at sexyliberal.com. What a lineup they've got there. I love this conversation with John. I think it was nuanced. He had some really great riffs and rants. Find out everything else about John Fugelsang in today's show notes. Let's do it right now with Fugelhorn. From Los Angeles, out there for the Sexy Liberal Tour, the only big show, but lots of big guests. I'm very excited to see my old friend whenever I can. Thank you for saying yes and meeting me here on a Sunday, John Fugelsang.
Pete, I told you never to call me here. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very thrilled to bring your show down to my level once more, Pete.
Thank you for obviously acknowledging the imbalance of our intellects here. I always appreciate when you do that. And thank you for giving me the special phone number in L.A. Now, what's this show you're doing? Go ahead and tell us what it is, and then we'll get to all this.
I do this tour with Stephanie Miller called the Sexy Liberal Comedy Tour. And over the years, we've been joined on stage by everybody from Margaret Cho and Daryl Hammond to Nancy Pelosi and Lily Tomlin. We are going to be doing our only show of the year for 2023 on Saturday, the 21st of this month at the Saban Theater in Beverly Hills, with sets from myself and Hal Sparks and the comedy duo Frangela and Stephanie Miller. And our special guests this year for the panel include Rob Reiner and Ron Perlman and Glenn Kirshner and a couple other names I'm not allowed to announce yet. So it's going to be live. And if you can't make it to LA, it is available to live stream as a pay-per-view. Just go to sexyliberal.com or Meathook, MEET Hook, not MEAT Hook. That's a totally different site. Meathook.com/live and look up Sexy Liberal Show. And it's the biggest political comedy party of the year, Pete.
Oh, that is going to be really good. A lot of tough liberal male energy when you got Kirshner and Perlman on a panel.
Yeah, I think I shouldn't say this, but I think Malcolm Nance is joining us on stage again.
It's a lot of tough.
It's going to be a party.
A lot of tough men. Oh, wow. That'll be. And what day is that?
That's Saturday, October 21st.
There you go. Very exciting. Very exciting. I'll be hosting a local Democratic fundraiser that night.
Very nice. I saw you were doing a show with J.L. Calvin, and I'm like, oh, my God, that's one of the strongest lineups I could hope to see, the two of you guys together.
Oh, yeah. And you would have liked to have seen it with the audience that was there. It was a Wednesday night in Pittsburgh, so it was packed to the gills, that venue.
Very jealous.
There were so many people there that it was hard after for us to even get out of there because there was so many people. The traffic, they had to hire cops, the Pittsburgh cops, to escort the audience out.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I hope you have a similar. You doubtfully will with that lineup in L.A. on a Saturday, but you might.
I don't know. I'd rather have the Pittsburgh cops than the LAPD at this show, but we'll see.
That's fair. Yeah, we win again. So, okay, lots to get to. How are you? I just thought it would be great to talk with you about how you're handling as the host of your show every night, 3 hours a night, live, call in. It's intimate. People get to know you. They get to know your thoughts. I feel like this story in the Middle East is in many ways a religious story, and I feel like there's very few people I like to talk more about religion with than you. But how are you handling this? How is your audience handling this? Has anybody broken up with you or the other friends? I hear people breaking up a lot with their friends over this.
Yeah, it's been a good, it's been a great week for political comedy, Pete. It's been a great week for topical humor.
Yeah, a lot of great bits being formed.
Well, it's been crazy because I've been, I'm going up to do this big show next weekend. So I've been doing a lot of shows in New York and LA to get ready. And people want to laugh, I'll tell you that. But it's heartbreaking. No, I haven't broken up with anybody over this. I had people break up with me over Trump. I had people break up with me over the Iraq war. But I don't find this or the politics of it very difficult for me to express, or the various dynamics of it all. I think it is very easy to walk and chew gum at the same time on a few of these issues. This was an atrocity. You can care about the Palestinian people. You can call out the injustices perpetrated on the Palestinian people and say that this was an insult to humanity, that this was an atrocity. This was just pure evil. It does not help the Palestinian people in any way. And if Hamas gave a damn about the people of Palestine, they'd release all the hostages right now. So they don't care. For a long time, I felt that both Hamas and the Netanyahu government are like wartime consiglieres. And if peace broke out, they'd all be useless. They need each other. I thought they were interdependent for years. And Netanyahu said as much in 2019. He said, if you want to keep the Palestinian statehood from happening, support Hamas, because he knows Hamas will not help the Palestinian people. And Hamas knows that, this is going to keep perpetuating. These guys will stay in power as long as the violence is there. Here's what I think. Criticizing Hamas doesn't mean you hate the people of Palestine, just like criticizing the Israeli civilian government doesn't mean you hate the citizens of Israel, just like criticizing the Trump White House doesn't mean you hate racist NASCAR fans.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a very difficult concept to understand. I think people's emotions get in the way, especially when there's the kind of atrocities that were committed by these Hamas terrorist fighters, whatever you want to call them. It's hard to believe that it's hard to believe that Hamas leadership gave them the order to specifically be as brutal as they were, but maybe they did. Maybe they did say burn people in their homes and kidnap people. I can imagine them wanting them to kidnap people because that's where they get the leverage. But the specific types of atrocities, killing babies, some of which reporting says they like cut babies' heads off and stuff like. It's hard to believe that those specific orders of that kind of atrocity were orders given by the leadership. But maybe they did. Either way, it happened, and so the backlash is going to be as unprecedented, I would think, as the attack itself seemed to be.
Yeah, Hamas was planning this for 2 years. So it's all the more remarkable they were able to get that $6 billion that Joe Biden released to a Qatari bank for Iran last month to fund the entire thing. Isn't that amazing, Pete? It's like keeping up with the lies is as stressful as keeping up with all the pain and suffering of this. and the amount of truly sinister characters all around the world who are trying to capitalize off of this. Putin is exploiting this to distract from his evil genocidal war on Ukraine. Netanyahu is exploiting this to distract from his corruption and trying to rig the entire judicial system of Israel to save himself. Donald Trump is using this to distract from his 91 criminal charges in 4 jurisdictions. Yeah. And the Republican Congress is using this to distract from their complete inability to govern. So a lot of people are cashing in different ways off of this atrocity. But on a spiritual level, I've always believed if God or Allah or Jehovah wanted anybody dead, he'd smite them himself. So God doesn't need your help in smiting someone on his behalf. Yeah. And honestly, I'm at a point now where if any of these people believed what their holy books say, they wouldn't commit acts of violence. But what we see happening here, what we see happening, in Israel and Hamas and in America, George W. Bush, people keep saying Christians don't do things like this. Well, there's, the Crusades and the Klan. And let's be closer to home. Christians do this as well. Christians just do it the acceptable ways through airplanes and bombs and missiles. George W. Bush said God told him to invade Iraq and colonize it and slaughter hundreds of thousands of people. On the eve of the Iraq war, in his speech in the Capitol, George W. Bush said, and I never forgot it, I was so offended, and I still am. George W. Bush said, God will not be neutral. So, I think the lesson here is if you put extreme religious conservatives in positions of power, you will see the opposites of what all their religions teach. Because I don't blame this on religion. I blame this on fundamentalism religion. The fundamentalist extreme right wings of all religions are to blame. Because the vast majority of liberal or moderate Christians, Jews, and Muslims are getting along just fine right now all over the world, and it never makes headlines. It's the extreme right wings of all religions. Those would be the ones that always think women are second-class citizens, always think that sex is icky except it's for procreation, always put down LGBT people, always think other religions are inferior, always think violence is okay if my side does it. Extreme Christians, extreme Muslims, extreme Jews, the fundamentalists are to blame. And let the record show Christianity still has a much higher body count for terrorism committed in Jesus' name than in Islam's.
Yeah, it really is so well said, all of the nuance that you included about religion. There are so many amazing folks who are also very devoutly religious, very pious of any number of religions. It would seem that when it's used in divisive ways along gender, along ethnicity, along borders, obviously there are Arab Muslims that hate other Arab Muslims, and there's obviously a real internal struggle, very divisive civil struggle in Israel itself. But I think what's
watching Christians kill Christians in Ireland.
Sure, and look at America if you want to see Christians against Christians. I suppose right now it's easy to say that as well. But it does seem like, well, for sure, alliances have changed. The world has changed. The global order has changed, and many of these Arab states that were once more allied with the Palestinian people, use them, you'd probably be better said, are no longer. You've been covering and talking about this potential Saudi deal with Israel. It looks, a lot of experts seemingly saying that is why Hamas did it, what it did when it did it. The timing has to do with trying to scuttle this deal. Then you've got the Iranians obviously always posing a threat. And then we can go on about Syria and obviously Lebanon and the northern border. The Egyptians are always a player. And I wonder what you think of this kind of newer global order. You've been covering this as long as I have, and it seems like that matters the most with the outcomes here.
Yeah, I can't stop feeling exactly how I felt in the weeks after 9/11. And I see that the same exact kind of dynamic is being replayed, and that Hamas, like bin Laden, gambled on chaos, gambled on unspeakable violence that would draw more parties into a worldwide conflict. George W. Bush gave bin Laden exactly what bin Laden wanted.
Yeah.
By invading a country that had never attacked us.
Yeah.
It created ISIS. It created so much death and destruction and hurt for the West. And you could argue, and by the way, and Bush also gave bin Laden exactly what he wanted when he pulled the troops out of Saudi Arabia, which was the reason the attack happened in the first place. So Hamas looks at that history, which we're not really taught here, and they say, well, let's do the same thing. And so when I saw Saudi Arabia maybe canceling this deal with Israel, which the Biden and White House has worked very hard to achieve, it makes perfect sense. They're following the bin Laden 9/11 playbook, and everybody is falling into it. And what scares me the most right now is that Israel is going to respond in such a bloody way and slaughter so many innocent civilians that they're going to make the same mistake Bush did and destroy all the goodwill they have engendered for their suffering at the hands of this terrorist attack. You know, it's not going to take long for people to turn their backs on supporting the Netanyahu government, not Israel. They're totally separate things. I distinguish between Judaism, Israel, and the Netanyahu civilian government, which is just, he's a corrupt thug. And, you know, my heart breaking for the people of Israel doesn't change the fact that he's a corrupt thug. So I worry, Pete, because the chaos agents there and abroad are going to use this to try to consolidate their own power. Putin's going to try to use this to slaughter more Ukrainians. And, you know, I don't know if Netanyahu's career can be saved by this. This is a guy who spent 20 years, almost 20 years, telling us all, I keep you safe. I'm the one who keeps you safe. And look at this. And of course, Donald Trump, who said his ridiculous Abraham Accords, which was not a peace deal. It was 3 countries that weren't at war, and assassinating Iranian generals kept you safe. And it's like, no, violence always creates more violence. The next Gandhi is going to have to come from this area of the world. And it's either going to be Israel or it's going to be Palestine. But I'll tell you, it'll come from young people, because young people are tired of this. There were kids at that music festival who probably agreed with the Palestinian cause that got slaughtered by Hamas.
Yeah, I want to believe that. I'm usually pretty optimistic about it, but I think young people are also pretty angry, and rightfully so in many instances. Going back to Netanyahu and, you know, trying to explain more how the Israeli people feel. This is just one report, but I think it's pretty significant because people keep drawing these parallels between 9/11 and Bush's reaction to what Netanyahu's reaction or Israel's reaction, the military, the government could be. And on Thursday night, apparently, Benjamin Netanyahu visited an elite reserve brigade for a situational assessment and was supposed to deliver a speech at the podium with flags and a microphone. But a serviceman shouted liar and loser and wouldn't let up. So no speech at the podium and a rushed departure. I don't know if it was just one serviceman. I'm not sure. I mean, this reporting looks to be pretty accurate, this reporter I've been following. But the point is, imagine, you know, Bush being booed while he was on the rubble with the megaphone. I mean, for a while, the Bush administration and Americans had the world's sympathy and support after that horrible attack. But then we squandered it. And as you mentioned on your show, is listening, I forgot about this. Condoleezza Rice got promoted.
The greatest failure of national security in the history of this country, and the national security advisor got a promotion.
Yeah.
And no one even brought this up at the time. And you're right. I mean, it was a couple of years between Bush capitalizing off this terrorist attack to go and steal Iraq's oil, which is all that war was for. All the oil reserves were divided up among 4 Western oil companies. And then within a couple of years, you see Bush having a shoe thrown at him. You know, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but for that to happen with Netanyahu, or if Netanyahu government can survive this. But, you know, the other big similarity is both sides were warned. Bush was told in the presidential daily briefing of August 6, 2001, bin Laden determined to attack the U.S. And he went and, you know, picked brush at his ranch and for a while. And, you know, Netanyahu was told by Egypt that something was coming.
Yeah, and remember Richard Clark? In his book.
Against All Enemies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, there's so many similarities, and yet obviously so different. And it would seem that I went through and reviewed and revisited so many of the debates over the years on the Arab-Israeli conflict, from Dershowitz, Chomsky to some other explainers, just history stuff. It does seem like the extremists, as you mentioned earlier, on both sides scuttled peace whenever peace was close or almost made. And, you know,
like, I'll give Clinton credit. Most American presidents kick this thing down the road. I think Bill Clinton really, really wanted it to happen. And, you know, there was even a Nobel Prize, but in the end, it was Arafat who killed the deal. And Arafat looks like Gandhi compared to Hamas now.
And what my understanding is, and we could ask other experts and scholars, is what Arafat got, what the Palestinian people got in that deal was far greater than anything they will ever be offered again. It's just they've lost more and more of their land. It's been illegally acquired and settled on, according to the world, the UN, I believe. But now, whatever peace negotiation, whatever solution, whatever two-state, one-state solution, it'll still be far less than what Arafat and Palestinians got in that deal in the Oslo Accords, I believe it was, in 95, 93?
Yeah, around there, yeah. And look what happened there. I mean, Yitzhak Rabin was slaughtered.
Right, that's what I was saying.
One of his own for trying to make peace with Palestine, just like Anwar Sadat, a Muslim, was slaughtered by one of his own for trying to make peace with Israel. It's always the right-wing fundamentalists of the religions that cause the violence.
Well, let's talk about what's going on here at home with those same folks, and just to, connect the two. I saw a lot of people reacting, a lot of Donald Trump Jr. and Amy Kremer. Do you know who she is? These Moms for Liberty type folks.
Oh, well, yeah, I admire her work very much.
Yeah.
It's not liberty. And unless you're, a trans person or a gay person or a woman who wants control of her body or someone who wants to smoke a plant that's grown here since before white people landed. But other than that, they're really for liberty, Pete. Go ahead.
Well, so there was this reaction after Hamas terrorist attack that those same people are going to be coming across our border by Donald Trump Jr. and a lot of the MAGA world. And it was a weird moment for me. And I know I've said this to a couple of guests, so forgive me to my audience, but I still want to kind of unpack and examine. Like, the threat is right-wing Christian nationalists, the MAGA movement. They are where, I'm not saying they're all a threat. I'm saying that almost every one of these major terrorist attacks on synagogues, on black churches and black folks in a grocery store, I mean, these are white extreme, nationalists, white supremacists and Christian nationalists, the abortion clinics. I'm saying the vast majority of the terrorists in America are those people. And then they're pointing to somebody else who isn't really a threat.
They said the same thing about ISIS, Pete, to hurt Barack Obama. They said the same thing, that ISIS is going to come to America, going to come to Mexico, and then cross the desert with all their...
But they just don't see... How do you explain to people the difference or similarity in terrorism? A terrorist is a terrorist, but if they're a brown Muslim and they're doing it this way versus a white Christian and they're doing it that way, they're the same... It's the same ideology in terms of being radical extremists that have turned violent. How do you explain that to domestic white American audiences?
I do it in two ways. Number one, I talk about how, just like ISIS, Hamas couldn't even take over Detroit, if they wanted. So come on. What is terrorism? What is the dictionary definition? It is the use of violence or the threat of violence against civilians to enact change in policy. The use of violence or the threat of violence against civilians or government officials to bring about changes in policy. That's January 6th. Like, we are very good at not calling stuff we don't consider terrorism, but January 6th was terrorism. George W. Bush bombing the holy hell and slaughtering hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians in Iraq was terrorism. We just use that term for the ones we don't like. But you're exactly right. There have been over 400 terrorist attacks in this country since 1994 by right-wing extremists. I think Antifa's had one, so again, just like Republicans don't care about Republican voters, right? Republican politicians don't care about non-millionaires. That's why if the Republican Party had policies that would make the lives of non-millionaires better, they'd never shut up about it.
Right.
They don't. They just care about power. So they're going to try to tell you who to be scared of, be it trans children playing sports or Hunter Biden's laptop. Hamas is not interested in protecting the people of Palestine anymore. They're interested in power. Because if peace broke out, Hamas would be out of a job. So they need war. They need the violence to continue. Netanyahu, same thing. If he didn't have a terrified populace, if Israel lived in peace and security, they'd have no use for this thug, who's proven himself to be useless, by the way. Well, so this is how mediocre men get to power and capitalize off of fear while not actually doing anything to help their constituency.
I'd argue he's proven himself to be very useful to a certain segment of the Israeli population.
Sure, but I mean, yeah, and hey, ka-ching, ka-ching. But again, I think I think Hamas and Netanyahu are locked in this codependent death embrace. because they both need each other to stay in power. And neither one of them is putting their people first. I mean, if you care about the peace and stability of Israel, then let's get to work giving the Palestinian people their own independent state with control of their own borders. You have nukes and you have the U.S. as your bodyguard. And if you're in Palestine, it's the digital age. I mean, little brother is watching. We've all got phones. It's time for you guys to do Gandhi-level nonviolent protests to show the world what your case really is, not blow the hell out of Israeli children, which is only going to make people hate you and hurt your cause more. I mean, Hamas set back the cause of statehood 25 years with this atrocity. So neither side is serious about actually helping their people. It's all just power, 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 and guy shit.
How do you think, any observations as to the American conversation and American media about this conflict? Have you seen anything that made you feel uncomfortable, angry? I mean, everybody's talking about it. I'm not sure how much you're taking in.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly tried to avoid the media the first weekend. It was just too painful.
Yeah.
There's a certain subset of Republicans that, in my lifetime, the GOP has always been the party of militarism. Everything Dr. King warned us about, right? I mean, if you grew up with Reagan and Bush, you just got used to us bombing people all the time. Lebanon and Libya and Grenada and Kuwait. I mean, George H.W. Bush sent American troops to war to restore the dictator of Kuwait and repel Saddam Hussein after we told Saddam Hussein he was okay to invade. So it's always been war, war, war. And then when George W. Bush tried to have his illegal, immoral invasion and occupation of Iraq, a lot of us protested and they hated us. We warned them and they hated us.
Yeah.
And then we were proven completely right. There were no WMDs. The body bags kept coming home for years. It was a bloody failure. And they hated us more when we were proven right, Pete. So then in 2015, Donald Trump comes along and he starts telling Republican voters in debates, George Bush lied to you, that war never should have happened. And they're all like, yeah, you're right. Everything liberals have been saying for years. And Donald Trump never opposed that war. I didn't see him in any marches. He didn't oppose it. He just capitalized off the zeitgeist. So once Trump gave Republicans permission to cut Bush loose and acknowledge that they'd been lied to, in the last couple of years, you've seen this incredible dovishness that some Republicans, like, moral cretins like Matt Gaetz are espousing. And it's been coming out a lot against Ukraine. Now, when it comes to the Putin invasion of Ukraine, you either support Vladimir Putin's belief that Ukraine doesn't exist and he has a right to invade and slaughter thousands of civilians to make it part of a Russian empire again, or you support the right of the Ukrainian people to self-defense and repel their invaders. Those are the two sides. The media won't ask Republicans questions like that. So, they just come to say, oh, why should we keep funding this war, endless war? Oh, the Democrats are now the party of war. Oh, you're I've never heard Republicans say the words military industrial complex until this. But the insidious part of it, Pete, is they haven't changed at all. They supported authoritarianism then. They support authoritarianism now. They supported Bush's invasion of a smaller country that never attacked us. And they support Putin's invasion of a smaller country that never attacked us. These guys are just repeating pro-Putin talking points all day long. But they've been doing it in this cosplay of being anti-war, anti-militarism. Now that this atrocity has happened, the mask is gone and their bloodlust is out and they want to see some Arabs slaughtered just like it's 2003 all over again.
Oh, man. Yeah, what a rant. That's why we love John Fugelsang. A lot to unpack there, but
it's funny, isn't it? I'm going to open with that on Saturday night. Yeah, that preachy screed.
I like it. No, I like it. It's less. It was a little preachy about just the hypocrisy of it all. But I mean, I think that you point to all the different positions that they've taken based on whoever's in charge, and just it's never really logical. It's never really about what America's interests in are or the long term. It's very reactionary and very corrupt, really, as to why they choose what they choose when they choose it. But overwhelmingly, I think what's fascinating is that they would have been for Ukraine and against Republicans if it wasn't for the fact that they think Putin might help Republicans and Donald Trump get reelected. Like that, I think people forget or just they don't want to say that that's the issue here. Putin is...
Our Republican friends are getting Putin propaganda all day long from right-wing news.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
and
like...
in congressional hearings, it's being used even.
Yeah, and Putin did what Bush did. Putin invaded a smaller country that never attacked him. And right-wingers had no problem with Bush doing it. They have no problem with Putin doing it. They have a problem with us helping our allies fight back. That's their problem. So I think as someone who is against Bush's war of aggression, I am also against Putin's war of aggression. And I find it to be completely consistent.
You've watched.
I hate militarism. I'd like to be more of a turn the other cheek kind of guy. But again, man, it's like I'm just looking for a little consistency from these right-wing nationalists. And they've been playing anti-war for a year now, but now we see what they're really made of.
Among those anti-war...
Rubio called for, what did he say? He said, like, what word did he... Eradication of Palestinians? Like, they're just talking about ethnic cleansing now.
Yeah, you can't use those kinds of words, it would seem. What do you think about... You've seen the right-wing strategy narratives unfold over the years. You've seen them all. And I'm most fascinated by this narrative, this campaign that I don't know how effective it's been. It's hard to know. The wussification of the United States military, the wokeification, the fact that anything that they allow gays to serve, or that they allow trans people to serve openly, or that they provide health care for women who want abortion, or that it's, being wokeified along racial lines and so on. You've got a black Secretary of Defense now.
They don't like him, do they? Boy,
how do you?
I've never seen Republicans talk to a white Secretary of the Army like they talk to this man.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think if they talk that way about if Trump, criticized Mattis, then they would turn on him maybe too. But the point is, how do you understand, or how effective do you think it's been, this right-wing strategy that now the military...
In the bubble, it only affects people who live in the right-wing bubble. People who don't live in that Tucker Carlson world don't hear any of this crap. The reason why enlistment is down is because a generation has grown up seeing what war does. A generation has grown up seeing disabled, homeless soldiers on the streets because we sent them over to fight a war for a lie that killed hundreds of thousands, sent home 4,486 soldiers in a body bag, and even more who've died from suicide since. So, also unemployment is very low in this country. It's at a 50-year low. I know the numbers are all bullshit, but it's the system we've agreed on. So those are reasons why enrollment is down, not because the military is woke. And every time I get asked about this, every time I hear someone making this point about how the military is woke, we don't need a woke military. And woke is just, it used to be a term used to call out racists by anti-racists. Now woke is a term racists use to call out anti-racism. Every generation finds a new way to smear empathy. When I was a kid, it was bleeding heart liberals. Then it was politically correct liberals. Then it was social justice warriors. Every generation, now it's woke. Every generation finds a way to smear the idea of not being a dick. And that's all woke is. It's like, just don't be a dick and be aware of dickery and be aware of those who are going to be dicks to you.
Yes.
That's all it is. So like a lot of this has to, a lot of them are mad because it's the deconfederization of the military. The Confederate flag was banned by the Marine Corps in this decade, and they're removing the names of these white supremacist traitors from military bases like Fort Bragg. That's upsetting a lot of people because we're finally, acknowledging, hey, the Confederacy was an enemy nation that kept humans as livestock. Maybe let's not glorify them. But otherwise, I always ask them, tell me how the military is woke. Why? Because the military supports affirmative action. They have in court for years because of the military knows they know that a diverse hiring pool is better for them with their candidates. Like the military, helping women cross the border to terminate pregnancies because the military thinks that women who take up arms to defend this country have a right to their own body autonomy. Like, call it woke all you want. If the Democratic Party could, get their shit together, they could talk these points down because it's all nonsense.
I think the Democratic Party, hold on, I wonder if we disagree. I think they do have their shit together. I think like the AOCs and the Jasmine Crockett.
Not on messaging.
On messaging, you probably are right. I don't know how to even make the
word woke, not on messaging. And against the woke military, my God, I mean, no, there's the fact that this debate is still going on. Tommy Tuberville, like, we don't have a chairman of the Joint Chiefs because this guy who doesn't even live in Alabama thinks women in uniform don't have a right to determine what happens to their own bodies because he thinks men should decide. It comes down to, do Americans have a right to not be pregnant? Do American citizens have the freedom to not be pregnant? Or does this big government, does the state have the power to force American citizens to be pregnant against their will? I want to hear Democrats talk like that, because that's the argument against what Tommy Tuberville is doing. And these are the same people, Pete, who said to us years ago that, letting gay troops serve might compromise military readiness. And now they are systemically, deliberately compromising military readiness.
Yes, they certainly are. Not the gays, the people.
Not the gays, the actual homophobes. They're the ones doing it now. Haters going to hate. Again, the Republicans have nothing to offer white, hardworking non-millionaires except umbrage. That's it. They have no policies to help non-millionaires. They just have talking points to piss them off.
Did you know that there's one submarine that is just gay men, and it's also the most effective submarine?
No.
Well, I just made that up because I thought it would be a really fun bit to explore with you. But just
is it full of semen, Pete?
Just a bunch of...
The jokes write themselves, don't they?
Well, it could be gayer, really, than being on a submarine. Although, also, I was watching one of those submarine movies. They do have women on them. What could be harder to, be in close quarters with I think those things are worth exploring because you're stuck in a sub with people. I'd want to have sex with everybody after a certain point, I think.
I'd be terrified. I only went down once. We did a special, you might remember, from the Bermuda Triangle a few years ago. I went down to the two-man submersible, 1,000 feet below.
Crazy that you did that. Crazy that you went. You actually
so scary, so claustrophobic for me. It was amazing. But I had to really focus on relaxing and breathing.
Didn't you though? You told me offline you had sex with everybody else that was in that sub.
It was only one other guy, and I'm not sure he was aware of it. But yeah, I had to blow off.
He was focused on driving. All right, let me get back to another really serious topic, which I know I want to get your take on, and that is the GOP chaos, the chaos in the GOP, the civil war, as Hakeem Jeffries is coining it, in the House Republican caucus. And no good analyst is able to see how this is going to work itself out. My favorite political analysts, everybody's like, just seemingly the Republicans have no strategy. These 8 congressmen that are nihilists that want to destroy everything and get headlines, they don't seem to be changing. What is going on? What does this mean for Democrats? What does it mean for Republicans? What does it mean for America?
Well, I mean, we got to talk about the madness of the presidential race, too. But in terms of Congress, remember when Nancy Mace was pretending to be better than all those guys? Remember that? Wasn't that fun back in the day?
I feel like the media gave that to her a lot.
I feel like they did as well, because she's just as awful.
Yeah.
This is the same civil war that's been going on for a long time.
Yes.
There's 5 political parties in America, right? There's the right wingers, and there's the Republicans, there's the liberals, and there's the Democrats, and then there's the apathetic. Those are the 5 groups. And these 5 groups are, or 4 of these groups are fighting for the apathetic ones, trying to get white people in 7 swing states. That's what all of our politics are about. This particular Republican civil war shows that they are incapable of governing. What I find most interesting is how much of this should be measured as congressional rebukes against Donald Trump. Because the McCarthy thing happened because Donald Trump probably wanted it. Donald Trump didn't lift a finger to save McCarthy. And I like they're trying to blame Democrats for it. Democrats did not vote to oust McCarthy. McCarthy lied to the Democrats and broke promises to them all on his own. The Democrats voted to not save his butt anymore. This was a Republican policy, and McCarthy agreed to this insane, stupid motion to vacate rule where one person can call for a vote. It's madness. I thought it was interesting that Jim Jordan was his boy, and yet the majority of Congress voted for Steve Scalise. And that was an exciting vote, wasn't it? You had David Duke without the baggage against the wrestler, molester, protector. I'm so
insurrectionist.
Both of them insurrectionists. And Scalise, who this white supremacist, David Duke without the baggage, homophobic, voted against equal pay for women, voted against the Violence Against Women Act. This guy who voted to make it easier for the mentally ill to get guns and then got shot by a mentally ill person. His life saved by a black lesbian married to a woman Capitol cop. That's why I love America, Pete, because America's already great. Crystal Griner is her name. She saved the life of that woman-hating bigot. But then, when he dropped and Jim Jordan ran again, they had another vote. Jim Jordan came up 80-odd votes shy of the 217. That is a rebuke to Trump as well. Trump's endorsed Jim Jordan twice. And both times, Jim Jordan has failed.
Well, that's what's interesting about it. First of all, Ken Buck, I think his name is, Congressman. He's
Ken Buck, he's telling the truth about it. It's always weird when one of these guys like Liz Cheney telling the truth about something.
Ken Buck said, well, I asked both Scalise and Jordan if they would denounce, the big lie, if they would say that Joe Biden was the duly elected president. And neither of them would. He said they hemmed and hawed. They gave him mealy-mouthed answers, number one. And number two, yes, overwhelmingly they voted against Trump's pick of Jordan. But apparently I heard it's as a result of an anonymous ballot. Like they wouldn't have done that. Those Republicans that voted against Jordan wouldn't have done it under their name, because then Trump would have had he would have collected on all of them.
Yeah, that's why people saying, oh, maybe these maybe 5 or 8 of these Republicans who represent districts Biden won by double digits, maybe they would come over and vote with Democrat. No, Donald Trump would primary all of them. Donald Trump would do anything he could to get them thrown out. And that's the problem we have right now in this Congress. I think I've talked about this with you before, but I call it the Dave Brat rule. Eric Cantor was the minority leader in the House, and every week he'd go meet with Obama and say no to everything. No. And he'd do fundraising emails saying, every week I go to meet Obama and I say no. Give me money. So then Dave Brat challenged him and primaried him in his own district, saying, if I was your congressman, I wouldn't even meet with Barack Obama. How dare this guy meet with Barack Obama every week? And it worked, and they got rid of Eric Cantor.
I just want to, that is such an important historical...
If they do their jobs, they lose their jobs. If they work with Democrats to improve the lives of the folks back home, they get primaried by somebody crazier and more racist than them. So that's the paralysis. If they do their jobs, they lose their jobs.
Oh, God, it's such a historical point. It's always great to talk to somebody like you who's been covering this as long as I have, because our memories... whether they may not be perfect, but we do remember that Eric Cantor and these other Republicans were extremists when Obama was president, and they got pushed out by other extremists because they all work for the right-wing talkers. They all work for Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, now Alex Jones, and the rest. That's who they have to answer to, and you can't govern by answering to a guy who his only consequence is getting ratings, so thus being divisive. Like they got more and more. So Ryan went, Cantor went, Ryan goes, Boehner goes. And now those guys are, some of them on media, Trey Gowdy, going after Matt Gaetz. Like, how dare he? How dare you?
Now they're coming on like Obi-Wan. The best line I heard, and I don't know who said it, forgive me, but when Newt Gingrich attacked Matt Gaetz, somebody said, like, Newt Gingrich is a guy who pours radiation into a lake, and 30 years later, he's screaming at a three-eyed fish.
That is wonderful. And there's so many other similar metaphors that you could say for all these guys who seeded the land, who the fertile ground for what they created. And now it is all
Republican speakers of the House. I mean, Gingrich to Hastert, the wrestler molester, to Boehner, to Paul Ryan, to McCarthy, to like Jim Jordan. Republican Speaker of the House has become the Spinal Tap drummer of government jobs.
John, as long as we've been doing this, I feel strongly that the Republican Party has gotten more and more extreme, as we've just illustrated so well here. I feel like the Republican Party has gotten less corporate and more, I believe, receptive to the grassroots of the progressive movement. And I believe that during our time in our careers, progressives have done some really wonderful, amazing things and continue to fight for the rights that we have lost. But I feel like that's how I see it. Do you see it that way?
The House has become more like that. But no, I mean, the oligarchs still run this country. And the thing I like most about Joe Biden, the old Joe Biden, because old Joe Biden is wound up being my favorite of all the Joe Bidens I grew up with. I like how much billionaires are terrified of him. I like how much billionaires want to get rid of Joe Biden. But no, the billionaires still own this country. Look, illegal immigration, it's never going to go away. Like all this racism and xenophobia, Wall Street has no problem with undocumented labor propping up our economy. It always has. If they really wanted undocumented immigrants to stop coming here, we'd start arresting the white people who do all the hiring. There's no wall that can hide our help wanted sign.
But that's, I think you said the House has, but I believe the U.S. Senate, except for one or two senators, has also become very progressive. And on the issue of immigration, they passed comprehensive immigration reform, which would have actually done a tremendous amount because there is no.
But they were 2013, you mean? Yeah, but what happened there? Hannity was on his show every day.
John Boehner wouldn't. I say it every day. John Boehner wouldn't take it up for a vote.
Well, but Hannity every night back then was on the air talking with the Gang of Eight and was saying like, oh, this is not amnesty. This is not amnesty. And then Fox News saw the focus group polls. And the next night, Hannity began calling it an amnesty bill.
I did not know that.
Marco Rubio ran away from his own reform bill.
But still passed out of the Senate.
Yes.
And the House didn't take it. I'm saying, I think that the Democratic Party has become much more receptive to the progressive movement in so many ways. And I could name several senators. I think both the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to, you talk about billionaires owning, I fully agree with it, obviously. But, more than anything else, what we could do to curb that, and we can't do much, would be to have a Supreme Court that would overturn Citizens United and make transparency, or at least as the Senate wanted to pass when Obama was president. Remember the Disclose Act? Like, at least we should be able to know where the money's coming from. Democrats overwhelmingly believe in that. They're not overwhelmingly corrupt and working for the corporate agencies. I mean, look at Sheldon Whitehouse and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court, again, I would settle for a Supreme Court that represents the will of the American voter. Because
but we don't.
Talk about the 6-3 divide. Who are those 6? 5 of them were appointed by presidents who lost the popular vote but gained the White House anyway. 5 of them were appointed by presidents the majority of Americans voted against, and the 6th, Clarence Thomas, was appointed by a president who opposed the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I don't think Americans are in any way represented by the values of the Supreme Court.
I think if we had enough progressive Democrats, a few more, a majority, it would be maybe possible that you could pack the Supreme Court and get rid of the Electoral College, which would be the progressive triumvirate. That's what we need more than anything.
Getting big money out of politics, get publicly funded elections. I mean, at this point, might be our only hope. Getting big money out of politics, because it's the square root of everything, from pollution to perpetuation.
But Democrats believe in that, and the vast majority of Democrats want that and have tried to at the state level pass it.
Some won't talk about it at all because it affects donors. Democrats have the same problem. You could talk about corporate money controlling politics. Well, don't be surprised if you get primaried and your opponent gets all those big corporate donations.
Yeah, and I understand. I'm saying, though, the party that wants to change that paradigm, you think that they want it. I don't think Democrats want to keep having to glad handing and having to raise billions and millions for a House campaign.
But you mentioned the court packing. I mean, FDR back in the day had 3 Supreme Court justices on the court who were trying to dismantle the New Deal, and so FDR came out and made a big announcement and said, I'm going to pack the court with more judges. Yeah. He just threatened to do it. He just threatened to do it. And everyone got upset, and the Democrats got upset, and historians say, oh, it was so awful what FDR did. But that cabal on the court backed down and stopped killing the New Deal policies, and FDR stopped talking about it. A lot of us just want to see Joe Biden come out and threaten to do it, to put them on the offense and say, no, if Mitch McConnell can decide that we only have 8 justices for a whole year, then 9 is not a sacred number, and our country has grown since it was 9. We need more justices. 5 of these people were there who didn't represent the American voters. At least 3 of them lied in their confirmation hearings. Yeah. So, nope, we are going to put more justices on. Watch and see if this court doesn't behave more. Watch and see if this court doesn't adopt a standard of ethics they have to abide by, that Congress can have oversight over. Watch and see if they don't behave a little bit better. People just want to see the Democrats bring the fight to these people's door.
Lastly, what do you think about Joe Biden running for re-election? His decision to do that, do you think it's too late? What do you think of the conversation about that some people, obviously, in all, not only progressive, but across the media spectrum, are calling for him not to? David Ignatius writes a column about it at the Washington Post. What do you think about people calling for him not to run? What do you think of him deciding to run?
Who's the Democrat who's going to get the 220 electoral votes? What is it, 270? Who's the Democrat who's going to do that? Tell me who the Democrat is that's going to get the 270 electoral votes needed.
I think hypothetically a lot of Democrats would win against Trump if he were the nominee.
But if that's the nominee, if it's 2 old guys, here's the double standard that Donald Trump has 6 inches of plaque encasing his heart, but no one's talking about his age and well-being. They talk about Biden. And, I'm kind of sick of the ageism. Yeah, he's old. I get it. But I'll take the old guy who needs another nap over the old guy who needs another defense attorney. Harrison Ford is 80, Martin Scorsese's 80, Mick Jagger's 80, Carole King is 80. Any of those people I would vote for president, including Mick, even though he's not American. So, it's not about how old the candidate is. As old as Biden is, whoever he's running against is going to be campaigning on 95-year-old Herbert Hoover economics. So Biden ideologically will be the young guy no matter who is up against him. Would it be great to see like a Gavin Newsom or someone come in there and do it? Yeah, but it's not going to happen. So how do we support this president and get over this ageist bullshit? Because Biden is in actually very good shape for a man of his age, and his policies are in much better shape for our age. My biggest fear is twofold. One is that OPEC is going to cut production, so gas will be $5 a gallon next year. Yeah. Because, again, all the evil people in the world want Biden gone and want Trump back.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, too.
And the Saudi royal family and Kim Jong-un, all the most evil dictators on earth want Trump back, and they want Biden gone. So that alone gets me more committed. Yeah. What I'm also really afraid of is that Donald Trump will be a convicted felon by the time we get to August of next year for the Republican convention. He has 7 criminal trials. 7. There's the big 4 we talk about, but there's also the New York City trial right now. Yeah. There's E. Jean Carroll's second defamation case. There's the ACN Communications pyramid scheme case, January 29th. Donald Trump may be a convicted felon by the time the convention rolls around. What scares me, Pete, is the Mitt Romney wing gives us our first ever of our lifetimes contested convention, and a very squeaky clean Glenn Youngkin walks out the nominee, and that they give it to someone like that. That's what scares me more than anything.
Interesting. What about RFK? Would you have RFK on your show?
I have had him on my show. I've had Marianne Williamson on my show, and I've had Jill Stein on my show.
How long ago did you have RFK on, though?
I would have RFK on again. Yeah. I would ask him questions he doesn't get asked elsewhere.
Right. Sure. I'm sure you would. What do you think of his, I'm being serious, obviously, in case anybody sensed. No, I respect John as an interview as much as anybody. So what do you think of his independent run and who that helps or hurts?
Oh, it hurts democracy. I mean, he's not even
like the Republican or Democratic nominee.
I'm going to win the Hyannisport caucus. Like, he's not even going to win the Kennedy family in this campaign. I don't know who's funding him, just like I don't know who's funding Dr. West, and I love Cornel West more than anything. And I don't understand why this is happening right now. I mean, it comes down to 7 states, right? I don't blame Ralph Nader for the Iraq war. I blame 90,000 people in Florida who knew they were a battleground state and voted Nader anyway. I'm not against third parties. Our greatest president ever was a third party candidate, and he got the White House with 38% of the vote. And he was a Republican, and he was Lincoln. I'm not against third parties. I voted third party in the past in safe blue states. But, Roe v. Wade is gone. And here's where I get in trouble, because a lot of guys with purity tests and no uteruses in 3 states decided they weren't going to sully themselves and vote for Hillary Clinton. Guys with no uteruses who voted third party in swing states are why women are bleeding out in hospital parking.
Yeah, no, they're
so
a
Robert
big part
Kennedy
of it.
is doing this for himself, and I would love to have him back on my show and talk a lot about the origins of COVID, talk a lot about the vaccine. And, I don't think he's going to be, if anyone's going to vote for Robert Kennedy because Biden's too old, when they hear Robert Kennedy's voice, I don't know how they'll feel about that. He's gone from, he's even now begun claiming that maybe he got his throat problem from a vaccine, which he never said for years. It's
is he really saying that now? Oh my God.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about how the Jews and the Chinese are immune. I mean, the stuff he said is ridiculous. And what's interesting is that Donald Trump went from boosting him to now seemingly being afraid of him.
Yeah.
As RFK is eating into the nut job demographic, and Trump needs those. So Trump's going to cut him loose. I don't know how much longer he's going to stay in the race. I do know if he stays in the race, it's because he's getting tons of foreign money, tons of it.
It'd be interesting to watch that and find out who's funding him. It's hard to know. John, so great. You're just the guy I want to talk to. This is just the conversation I want to have today, and I hope people appreciate you and it as much as I did. Thank you so much for talking to me today. It was great, as always.
Well, everyone can see all this, but with dick jokes in funny form at the Sexy Liberal show on October 21st in Beverly Hills. If you can't make it to LA, you can get it on meethook.com/live.
I'll put links I'll put links, all of that in the show notes for people.
Or sexyliberal.com for tickets. It's going to be a fun pay-per-view on Saturday the 21st with Rob Reiner and Ron Perlman on stage.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be great alone. And Glenn Kirshner. Oh, very sexy panel. All right, bud, thank you so much.
I hope to see you soon, Pete. Thank you. I love your show.
Love your show. Thank you very much, John Fugelsang. Learn more about John and listen to him over on SiriusXM if you're still a subscriber there, 9 p.m. to midnight East, and his podcast. And see him this weekend at the Sexy Liberal. That's going to be really great. You can watch it on pay-per-view as well. Very cool. All right, well, that's what I've got for you today. I hope to see you tonight at the Hangout, 8 p.m. We'll do it for about an hour, maybe a little bit more, you know me, and I look forward to hearing from you there or any other time. standupwithpete@gmail.com is my email. John Carroll takes us in. He takes us out. JohnCarroll.org. Take it away, brother.
That's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels in leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.